I never saw myself making this video about 2 months ago because, truth be told, I never got into Xenoblade. I've played none of the games before 3 and only really heard about it online. However, seeing a lot of praise and hype for it online, mostly on Twitter, I gave in and bought the new game. And I absolutely do not regret it. From beginning to end, this game rules. I want to make this video just to really speak about how good this game is and my experience with playing it. Now, I'm going to give 2 disclaimers before starting. One, like I said, I have not played any of the Xenoblade game. I do want to after this game, but I have yet to play them. So I obviously can't give my thoughts on 1, 2, or X because I haven't played them. And 2, if you somehow didn't see the thumbnail or title, this is a spoiler discussion. I am not going to sugarcoat it and act as if it's just minor spoilers. I am dropping full major spoilers for this game. So if you haven't beaten the story yet and care about spoilers, click off the video now. I am covering as much as I can because the story of this game is fucking incredible. Speaking of what I'm going to cover though, might as well get on with that too. I'm going to primarily cover the characters, the gameplay, the story, and the soundtrack as well. Now that's enough rambling. Let's start off easy and talk about the soundtrack, which I am afraid to play because I'm worried Nintendo might drone strike me.
Ionios. Cruel irony that it should mean eternity, because slowly but surely, our world is now dying. Even though we have yet to realize that fact.
The music in this game slaps across the board, let me tell you that to start off. The Mobius song is actually really hype and genuinely feels menacing, especially at certain points in the song where it feels like the Mobius chorus are laughing at you. Even the normal battle theme you hear each time you enter a battle is a banger. The Chain Attack 2 gets you hyped up, which I think is a common theme throughout a lot of the songs throughout this soundtrack, especially the battle themes. They're really good at waking you up and really giving you energy. There is no point in this game where I felt tired or bored during a fight, because the soundtrack keeps the player feeling alive. And when the songs aren't this really energetic song, they're still quite nice to listen to, like slow melodies. And hell, I haven't even discussed probably an easy top 10 for this soundtrack, the vocal themes. A Step Away and Where We Belong each play once during 2 of the most hard-hitting scenes in the game, and listening back, both are still really quite emotional. Even without the context of the game, either way, both are nice songs. In A Step Away's case, it plays during the final scene of Chapter 5, where Noah and the team lost to N and are now locked up together with the exception of Mio, who's in the cell next to them. It's really good at conveying the emotion and sadness that the team's going through, especially knowing that Mio is going to die very soon, but I'll speak more on that during the story segment. The point is, this soundtrack just fucking slaps, easily one of my favorite OSTs, and I highly recommend everyone listens to it, even if you aren't a fan of Xenoblade. The gameplay is genuinely really good. I will admit the characters can feel a bit slow while traversing, but other than that, moving around feels good. And overall, the game is genuinely beautiful to look at. I like how all the gameplay mechanics are contextualized throughout the game with actual explanations instead of just saying, oh, you can do this. Even the save points after every chapter finishes is contextualized by Mio's diary, and when Mio dies, that diary is replaced by the flute she gave to Noah. It's really nice attention to detail. Combat is pretty good as well. It never feels like a too underpowered or overpowered either. Mind you, I played this on easy mode, and even then the game never felt too easy. I still had to think about my plays and make sure I was leveled up enough. Because if you don't do any side/hero quests, aside from the ones the game forces you to do to progress, you are not going to be able to take on the final boss. You can try the boss, but you definitely won't beat it. Overall, the game just feels good to play. Ouroboros, again, can feel slow, but I think that along with the cooldown is necessary in order to not make that gimmick busted, because by itself it's pretty strong. And the fusion arts are a nice detail, although I honestly never really used them. Chain attacks are also pretty fun, but I never really saw a point in using the hero characters, because you just use the main characters and then have them become Ouroboros to deal a shit ton of damage. Either way, it's a really nice feature and it's super helpful when you're doing a boss, especially during M's fight where she can straight up control one of the characters in your party. Chain attacks are a must. Anyways, there's a lot to talk about in terms of gameplay. There's a ton of mechanics and I don't have the time to talk about all of that, but I think I covered the main parts. With that said, let's move on to the characters. The characters in this game are actually really well done. At the start of the game and throughout most of Chapter 1, you only have 3 of the main characters. Noah, Lanz, and Uni. They're part of Keves and fight against Agnes. The other 3 are not in the first chapter until the very end, where Ouroboros is first revealed, and you meet Van Damme, who sets you off on your quest. These other 3 are Mio, Tyon, and Senna, and if it wasn't obvious, they are part of Agnes and fight against Keves. So already you have an interesting dynamic for these characters, and the game is really good at showing them bond throughout the game, especially as each chapter tends to have a focus on a certain character or more. I'm going to go through each of these characters as well as some others, and give a summary on them as well as my thoughts on them. Also going to mention this now, I am talking about these characters from a story perspective, not a gameplay perspective. Noah is basically the very main character of this game aside from Mio. The game focuses on him pretty much, and as we find out, N, one of the main villains, is an alternate Noah from a past life. Noah is very caring and most of the time restrains from taking a life, unless it's necessary, like in Chapter 4 when Consuls O and P drain the life force of Ethel and Camaravi, and Noah just fucking loses it. Noah's restraint from taking a life comes from his time in Keves of being an officer, a role where you don't necessarily fight but instead stay back and play a tune with a flute, where you send the life force of the dead off. I gotta say, Noah has to be one of the best characters in the game. He truly shines in Chapter 5 and 6, when his powers and sword have been sealed away, and he tries to break the cage with his bare hands, getting blood on them and fucking them up. And in Chapter 6 at the beginning, where he goes through his memories as N and learning what happened in order for that to happen. And since Noah is N, I actually kind of just want to talk about N for a split second. N in this game is truly peak. It's not at all a twist that N and Noah are the same. Hell, even I could tell after he appeared a few times. His story is pretty similar to Anakin Skywalker's in a way. Both were obsessed with a woman so badly that they would do anything to stop them from dying, but instead of Vader failing, N succeeds, which makes everything so much worse when you realize M never wanted that, and it only gets worse when M sacrifices herself so Mio could live longer. N's story overall is really fucking tragic, especially when you consider that he was exactly like Noah in his previous life, even fighting against the consoles as well, only to eventually become one, which adds even more to the Anakin comparison, because just like N, Anakin fought with the Jedi against the Sith, only to eventually become a Sith himself. With that said, let's move on to Mio/M. Mio is the other very main character that the game centers around. Just like Noah, she's an officer and tends not to kill unless needed. Both Mio and M are overall good. M might seem bad in her first appearance, but as the game continues, you see she was actually against what N was doing. But right now I'm not discussing M, so let's continue with Mio. Throughout the game and up until Chapter 6, one of the main focuses of the game is Mio due to her being in her 10th term. If you're confused by this, I'll very quickly explain it. Basically, in Xenoblade 3, most people are born through the Queen in cradles. They are born at around 10 years of age. Life starts at the first term, age 10 for us, and ends at the end of the 10th, age 20 for us. Mio at the start of the game is around 3 to 4 months away from the end of her 10th term, and the game never hesitates to bring this up. This storyline eventually reaches a climax in Chapter 5, as Mio is killed off in potentially the saddest way possible, but I don't want to talk much about this as I want to speak more about it in the story segment of the video. It's later revealed that Mio and M actually swap bodies right before their first fight, and Mio doesn't really die, but instead continues on in M's body. Mio's story is just massively sad. You know that she's getting closer to death each day, but there's nothing you can do to stop it. And even as M, it doesn't get much better as she's forced to live eternally because N couldn't deal with losing her, and she has to be a witness to N's crimes. And the game you can choose between her long hair and short hair once it's revealed Mio was actually in M's body, and I like to keep her long hair because it shows a mark of change for the overall character. Because while the team doesn't have to worry about her time limit, she's now a Mobius, and there's points in Chapter 6 where she feels like a burden to the team because of that. Overall, Mio is a really well-written character. Let's move back to Keves to talk about Lanz. Lanz is the second member of the Keves side of the team and the Ouroboros partner of Senna. His story is mainly focused on regret and coming to terms with what happened with another character by the name of Yoren, who died in his early terms only to later become a Mobius. He's definitely not as well written as Mio or Noah, and that really goes for the rest of the characters to be honest, but it's fine because Noah and Mio are the very center of the story. But Lanz is still pretty well written. Even at the start of the game you get flashbacks to what happened with Yoren, it's built up fairly well, and Lanz only feels worse when you get to the reveal that Yoren became Mobius. The Yoren storyline isn't the only thing that happens with Lanz though. Senna and Lanz both share a common idea that they aren't good enough. In Chapter 5, Lanz and Senna talk while in the Agnes prison, and Lanz admits that he really isn't confident and it's all just an act. Both want their time to shine, and they almost get that in the end of Chapter 5, where they try to sacrifice themselves to kill N, which ends up failing as Console X takes their Ouroboros powers away. I also think, just like the other two Ouroboros pairs, Lanz and Senna have a really good dynamic. Speaking of Senna, let's move on to her, since there's not much else to talk about with Lanz. Senna is the second member of the Agnes side of the team, and the Ouroboros partner for Lanz. Senna is probably my favourite character in the game, as I like her design and also because I feel like I can relate to her in a way. Senna's story in this game is mainly her trying to grow out the habit of never feeling good enough. Just like I said earlier in Lanz's part, she feels she lacks confidence and is waiting for her time to shine. She even states that she's envious of Noah, Mio, and Lanz because of that. She's definitely the youngest of the group, at least mentally. She's very childlike in her personality, and this can be seen in the way she talks. For example, she goes Mio, meanie, and whether you choose her order during the chain attack, she shouts. However, even though she's my favorite, she's probably the character I have the most issues with. I feel like as a character, she's wasted, to be honest. The arc of her never feeling good enough is a great arc for her character to go through, especially considering she's probably the youngest of the group, but I also wish there was more than just that arc. And the thing is, you'd think they'd give her this extra development in her hero quest, and while her hero quest is good, it's not even hers. The quest has almost nothing to do with Senna, it's way more related to Gondor instead, which is just really disappointing because the hero quests for the rest of the team all serve as important for the characters. Meanwhile, Senna barely knew Shania, so it didn't have nearly the same effect. Not to mention, the quest itself also for some reason felt pretty short compared to the others. I'm not sure why, it just did. Overall, I'm just kinda sad Senna wasn't as developed as the rest of the main cast. My goat Valdi, a side character, probably got more development than her. I still fucking love Senna, but in my opinion she was done so dirty in this game that it's honestly sad. Uni is the third member of Keves and the Ouroboros partner for Tyon. She might just have the greatest dialogue in the entire game. Holy shit, this bitch is funny as fuck. Her story in the game starts in Chapter 3 when you find a battlefield and Uni finds her body from a previous life. It is later revealed that she was killed by Consul D when a colony hit gold rank. This story comes to a close in a side quest when it's revealed this ranks were just a sham created by Mobius to motivate the soldiers. To explain the rank system quickly, each colony wants to rank up so they can stop fighting and live their lives with nice food and comfort. The ranks go like this: you start with dirt, then you go up to tin, which goes up to copper, coppers go up to iron, and after that it's steel, which move up to silver, and then finally silver goes up to gold. Except nothing actually happens when you get to gold. Uni also has an obsession with fortune clovers and is involved with a lot of fortune clover quests due to it being one of the key points of a character. In my opinion, I fucking love Uni. Her dynamic with Tyon works surprisingly well, and I think her character arc fits her perfectly, especially since it gives her more of a motivation to stop Mobius. Colonies destroy themselves to get to gold rank. It's sad to think about that when they do, they just end up dead. Tyon is the final member of Agnes and the Ouroboros partner for Uni. His story revolves around regret from his youth when he failed to save his friend Nimue. This is brought up a lot, but mainly starts near the end of Chapter 3 when one of Tyon's friends, Commander Izzard, is cloned by Consul J in order to trap the team. It comes to a close in the side story where he finds the rebirth of Nimue and another colony where everyone is freed from the flame clock due to, I'm pretty sure, a problem being born which made their irises unconnected to the flame clock. I can't lie, at the start of the story I found Tyon to be annoying as fuck, but his character absolutely gets better throughout the game. He's a smart person, but he's definitely not as confident, and I think that clashes well with the rest of the cast. Before we finish up the character segment, I do want to go through some other characters rather quickly. First off, Riku and Manana. They are part of the main cast, but there isn't much to talk about with them. Riku is the Nopon for the Keves gang, and basically acts as a mechanic and is the wise one. He provides tons of support for the team throughout the game, especially when it comes to Lucky 7. Manana is the Nopon for Agnes, and is basically the chef of the group. She provides the team with food, but isn't as smart as Riku. Next is Monica, who you meet in Chapter 5. She's cool, not too much to talk about with her, but like Riku, she provides a lot of support to the main cast, and gives a lot of context to the city. Her daughter, Gondor, on the other hand, is fucking awesome. I love her. I wasn't too sure on her character at first, because at the start it kind of makes her feel like a bitch, because of how she treated Shania, but when you get context and she goes through more development, she's a way better character and more likable. She's also fucking badass. Speaking of Shania, she's a bitch. You do feel sympathy for her, but her actions are completely unforgivable as a character, especially when you find out she became Mobius. Moving on, Chris is introduced in the final chapter and is one of the reasons Noah became an officer, but my problem with him is that he feels kind of rushed in. You don't hear about him for the entire game up until chapter 7, which just makes him feel out of nowhere. Especially when we already have a lot of reasons as to why Noah became an officer, so his inclusion feels much less important. His counterpart Miyabi is a lot better. We don't have many reasons as to why Mio is an officer. The thing is, we find out she didn't actually want to be, but Miyabi makes her warm up to it, which serves as a good step of progression for her character. Might as well finish this segment off by talking about Yoran, who is a focal point of basically the entire game up until chapter 7. His storyline is quite well written and his sacrifice feels well earned, especially because it's been built up for so long that it serves as a good ending for his character. Yoran as a character is really tragic, knowing how no matter what life he is in, he'll always be a failure. Anyways, let's move on to the final segment, which is the story. The story is actually really fucking good. It's not perfect. For example, I think some parts are definitely underdeveloped, like I said earlier, with Senna's side story being a complete waste. And as a character, Chris also feels very last minute. And I know a lot of people have issues with N and M, but I don't really agree with those critiques. In my personal opinion, this story is fucking near perfect. The foreshadowing is subtle but still great. One example of this is during chapter 3, Senna talks about how it's always the Keves side controlling Ouroboros. It's a small bit of dialogue, but it does lead up into the end where the Agnes side get their Ouroboros forms.
Meanies. What was that, Senna? I was up all night thinking. Those guys are so selfish. Selfish how? You know what I mean. Every time we interlink, they're the ones taking the lead. And me, all I do is watch. Oh, that's what you mean.
Tyon, all of you! I won't let this creep lay a finger on anyone!
Quick thinking, lad. Get off me. Had to go and play the hero. Come on. He's trying to protect you. Just stop it. No more arguing, Zane. Why a hell? You gonna hit something or not?
I'm here, creative. We haven't met before, have we?
There's two major scenes I want to talk about in this segment, the ending of chapter 5 and the end of the game, mainly because these are the points in the game where the story really shines.
Do you think an off-seer can ever reach others? You know, I thought our lives were like our music, always in our hands, under our control. I wasn't facing the truth. Even if I could reach people, I wouldn't be able to save them. I should have known that. It's unbearable, seeing life slip away from you, even though they're right there. What am I even doing?
This scene is fucking great. There's so much to talk about. Everything in this scene is just perfect. Mio's final conversation with Noah, N telling them about what his plan is for them, the choice of music, everything is just so well done. Let's start with the first part. Noah trying to break the cell door and trying to attack N when he tells them the truth shows a lot for his character. Throughout the game, he hasn't been the one to break down or get too emotional. However, throughout this entire scene, he's just not with it at all. He's completely defeated, and it's portrayed through how he refuses to eat, and during the montage of the cast trying to break down the door, he's the only one who's there in every variation. N in this scene is also just so fucking cool. Like, yeah, he's a terrible human being, but he's cool as fuck. This is the scene where it's truly shown off how much of a true threat N is to not only the team, but to the world as a whole, and they do it really well. The fact he was willing to kill off Mio just to spite the cast is cold as fuck. You can't help but hate N for this. It's so sick and twisted, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Mio's last conversation is genuinely sad as hell, and again, it points out how well the fucking writing is in this game, with the attention to detail. Noah says how she finally said his name, and if you go back and check the entire game before Chapter 6, she genuinely does not say his name once, which doesn't seem like much, but that's just fucking insane that they went to that much detail. And the part where she says how she wants to continue living instead of dying is not only such a nice part, but does a lot for her character and really shows how much this fight against Mobius has changed her perspective on life as a whole. But because we don't know this M talking, we just have to watch as her life comes to an end without being able to change that. It puts a staple on how horrible this only 10 years rule really is, and only motivates the player to beat the consoles even more. You could say the scene is ruined by the fact Mio ends up alive because M just happens to have switched bodies, but I'd say you're wrong for two reasons. One being the body swap was hinted at all the way back in the M fight, and two being the fact that M had to kill herself to not only escape Mobius, but to get it through to N, this wasn't what she wanted, and that alone is horrible knowing that that was the only way she could do it. That's all I can say for Chapter 5, since this video is already long enough for my standards. But I do highly recommend you play this game and get to this point, so you can really see how fucking awful this moment really is. With that said, let's move on to the ending. Okay, we finally reached it. This ending is perfect. Let's start off by talking about the cast and their final little moments together. I love how well this scene shows off the bond between each Ouroboros pair and how far they've grown from the beginning of the game. Noah and Mio thanking each other for sticking around and helping each other achieve their dreams is a great moment for them as characters. Lance and Senna is my favourite pairing, and them talking about how they won't be working out together anymore and how they coordinate a fist bump without looking at each other is fucking adorable, but it also makes me very much depressed. Uni being a little shit and calling Tyon her fourth best bud in reference to her favourite hobby being collecting fortune clovers is not only a good callback, but also a nice hint towards her feelings about Tyon. And then Tyon getting flustered is interesting, as it's never an emotion he usually shows. All of it is completely in character and fits perfectly. It's a very much needed change in tone as well, considering how depressing the rest of the game is.
What's up? Is there a problem?
Well, at least put me second or even third. Fourth seems a little harsh.
I'll think about it.
I also like Nia and Melia's little duologue about how they will eventually meet again. It's a short but nice moment that provides a little bit of hope for the Xenoblade 3 cast. Also, the references to previous games with Melia looking at the Monado and Nia looking at Photo with grown-up versions of Rex with her, Pyra, Mithra all holding children.
Become separated for a time. One day we'll surely get to walk hand in hand again. Everyone, thank you. I will see you soon then.
Once again, I'm gonna say it, this ending is fucking perfect. All of this combined with the fact the ending to the scene is sad as fuck, but also just beautiful. Where they're just running towards each other as the world split apart and there's nothing they can do to catch up. And the song choice is beautiful too. One thing I failed to mention earlier is the songs in the game aren't just really good, but they have actual context to the game itself. In this song, for example, Where We Belong, the song states, "This goodbye is not the end, I know, until we meet again," which fits with how Nia believes that even though everything that happened in XE3 will be forgotten and the timeline will be reset to before Origin, everyone will get to walk hand in hand again. This ending does really well at tricking the player into believing the ending is a sad one, but if you go back, you'll see this ending is good, that even though it may seem like they'll be separated forever, they will walk together again.
One day, I'll come see you. I promise.
Me too! One day! I promise!
This is the truth of our world. Memories melt in the morning light, and then a new day begins. Roads stretch out before us. So many paths. Which do you choose? That's up to you. Sometimes you might run astray. You'll stop, maybe cry in frustration. But you know, that's all right. For the roads, they go on without end. So look up, face forward, toward your chosen horizon, and just walk on.